My name's Allison. I'm 32 years old and I live in California, where it feels like nothing ever really changes. I married Peter 5 years ago, back when things seemed a little simpler. He was never perfect, honestly, not even close, but he made me laugh. And at the time, that felt like enough. He's 34, works as a mechanic, and has that kind of easygoing personality that everyone seems to like. People say he's fun and laid back, but honestly, sometimes I feel like he's just lazy. When we got married, I was working as an assistant manager at a local retail store. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I was good at it. Peter was already a mechanic by then, and while it's a steady job, it's not exactly lucrative. We weren't rolling in cash, but we got by. Back then, we were happy just splitting a pizza and watching Netflix after work. It was simple. It was enough. But life got more complicated. We had debt. Credit cards, a car payment, student loans, you name it. We tried to save for a house, but something always came up. A vet bill for the dog, car repairs, Christmas gifts we couldn't afford. It felt like we were always one step behind. Peter didn't seem to stress about it as much as I did. He's the kind of guy who'd rather fix something himself than pay for it, even if it means it's held together with duct tape. He's good at stretching a dollar, I'll give him that. But it drove me crazy how he could just shrug things off. I guess that's when I decided to step up. I figured if I worked harder, took on more hours, maybe we'd finally get ahead. I started picking up shifts whenever I could, working late, skipping lunch breaks. I told Peter that having kids wasn't on the table until we were financially stable, and he agreed. At least, he said he did. But I don't think he really got it. He'd still come home from work and plop on the couch, cracking open a beer like he didn't have a care in the world. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting there trying to figure out how we were going to pay off the credit card or afford groceries for the week. The thing is, I know I'm not perfect. I like to shop, maybe a little too much. I'm not talking about designer handbags or anything crazy, but little things here and there. A new pair of shoes, some skincare products, that cute jacket on sale. It adds up, and I know it. Peter's always been frugal, but sometimes it feels like he's cheap. He'll get on my case about spending $50 at Target, but he doesn't bat an eye dropping $60 at the bar with his friends. That's what really gets me. He always has time and money for them, but when it comes to us, it's like I'm an afterthought. I don't know if I ever really saw Peter as my dream guy. He's goofy, a little awkward, and let's be honest, not the best looking. But he's kind, and he tries. Or at least he used to. Now it feels like he's just coasting. He's content with his little world. Work, beer, friends, repeat. Meanwhile, I'm busting my butt at a dead-end job, trying to make something of myself, and it's like he doesn't even notice. The cracks started to show a couple of years ago. I remember one night, I came home after a 12-hour shift. I was exhausted, stressed, and just wanted to vent. Peter was sitting on the couch, watching some dumb action movie. I started talking about my day, about how one of my coworkers called out, and I had to cover for them, about how my boss was breathing down my neck about sales quotas. And you know what he said? "Babe, you worry too much. Just relax." Relax? I almost lost it. I told him it must be nice to sit around all day and not worry about anything. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "What's that supposed to mean?" he said. I didn't even answer. I just walked into the bedroom and shut the door. That's the thing about Peter. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get the pressure I'm under, the constant stress of trying to keep us afloat. And maybe that's partly my fault. I've made mistakes, plenty of them. But at least I'm trying. At least I'm doing something. I think part of me started to resent him after that. Not all at once, but little by little. Every time he'd laugh too loud with his friends, every time he'd crack a joke when I was stressed, every time he'd say it'll all work out, like it was that simple. I'd look at him and think, why am I doing all this for someone who doesn't even care? And then there's the money thing. I'm not proud of it, but I've always been bad with money. I don't budget. I don't save. I tell myself I'll start next month, but next month never comes. Peter's better about it. He always knows how much is in his bank account, how much he's spent, but he doesn't really help me, you know? He just shakes his head and says, "You've got to stop spending so much." Like that's some kind of solution. I guess what I'm trying to say is, we were already on shaky ground. And then I met him. It all started on a Wednesday. I remember because I'd been pulling extra shifts, and by midweek I was already running on fumes. The store was packed, people were being extra difficult, and I felt like I was one rude customer away from snapping. That's when he walked in. His name's Antonio. He's 41 but doesn't look it. Tall, in shape, sharp haircut, the kind of man who just looks put together. He wore a crisp button-down and jeans that probably cost more than my entire outfit. At first I just thought, wow, he's handsome. It wasn't anything deep. I noticed him the way anyone would. But then he smiled at me. And I mean really smiled, like he saw me. Not just another tired retail worker stuck behind a register, but me. He came over to ask about some new product. And we ended up chatting for a few minutes. Nothing major, just small talk. How the day was going, how busy the store gets around this time of year. But there was something about the way he talked, the way he looked me in the eye and seemed genuinely interested. It was such a stark contrast to Peter, who could barely glance up from his phone when I was mid-sentence. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about him. It wasn't like he said or did anything inappropriate, but just that little interaction reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Noticed, appreciated, even admired. And for someone like me, who's been grinding away at a thankless job while feeling invisible at home, that feeling hit hard. The thing is, I'd been spending so much time at work already, partly to get ahead financially, but also to avoid being home. Peter didn't seem to notice, or care, that I was gone most evenings. He'd be parked on the couch with the game on, or out with his friends, acting like everything was fine. We hadn't been intimate in months, and honestly, I didn't even want to be. How could I, when I looked at him and saw a man who didn't try? His belly was starting to hang over his jeans, his hairline was retreating faster than our bank balance, and he'd basically given up on impressing me. Meanwhile, I was killing myself at work, trying to hold it all together. Over the next few weeks, Antonio started showing up more often. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then I noticed he'd always come by my department, even if he didn't need anything from there. He'd ask me about my day, make little jokes, and just linger. It wasn't anything obvious, but there was this unspoken energy between us. I'd catch him looking at me, and my heart would do this stupid little flutter. It wasn't long before I started comparing him to Peter. How could I not? Antonio was polished, confident, and successful. He carried himself like a man who had his life together. Meanwhile, Peter could barely bother to clean up the living room, let alone himself. I started wondering, what if? What if I had someone who actually took care of me, someone who didn't make me feel like I was doing everything on my own? I know how this sounds. Believe me, I've gone back and forth in my head about whether this makes me a terrible person. But then I think about how I've been treated, how I've been overlooked, taken for granted. Peter doesn't make me feel wanted or special anymore, and when I try to talk to him about it, he just brushes me off. One night, I decided to test the waters. Antonio had been extra friendly at work that day, complimented my outfit, asked if I'd been working out. I could feel my face flush when he said it, like I was back in high school and the cute guy in class had finally noticed me. When I got home, I brought him up casually, while Peter was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. So, this guy at work today, he's one of our regulars, was telling me about his job. He's in sales or something, makes 6 figures. I laughed a little, trying to sound nonchalant. Must be nice, huh? Peter didn't even look up. Yeah, sure, he said, half listening. He was watching some highlight reel on his phone, the sound of cheering and whistles filling the room. I tried again. He's one of those guys who seems like he has everything figured out, you know? Like, he's always dressed nice, drives a nice car, just makes me think about how some people have it all together. Peter shrugged, still not looking at me. Good for him. And that was it. No curiosity, no jealousy, not even a flicker of interest. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe for him to sit up, pay attention, see me for once? But he didn't. He just went back to his phone, like I wasn't even there. That was the moment I started to realize how checked out we both were. I was already weighing my options in my head, and I didn't even feel guilty about it. I deserved more, didn't I? More than a husband who couldn't be bothered to care. more than a life of scraping by while Peter coasted. And then there was Antonio, who seemed like everything Peter wasn't. Driven, attentive, and, let's be honest, attractive. Over the next few weeks, I started spending more time at work. Part of it was genuine. Holiday season was coming up, and we were short-staffed. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't look forward to seeing Antonio. Every time he walked in, my heart skipped a beat. He'd always make a point to stop by and chat, and I started to notice little things. How he'd stand a little closer, how his hand would linger when he handed me something, how he'd smile when he caught me looking at him. I couldn't tell if he liked me, or if he was just being friendly. But then one day, he made the first move. It was subtle, but it felt huge. He came in near the end of my shift and asked if I'd had dinner yet. When I said no, he smiled and said, "Well, maybe you should let someone treat you for a change." My stomach flipped. Was he asking me out? I wasn't sure. But the way he said it, the way he looked at me, it made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. I laughed it off, saying something about how I'd probably just grab something quick on the way home. He nodded, but there was this look in his eyes, like he was testing the waters too. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. About how he made me feel. About how different my life could be if I were with someone like him. Someone who could provide for me, take care of me. Someone who didn't make me feel like I was always struggling alone. I know it's not fair to Peter, but the truth is, I've started to resent him. He's comfortable with our life, but I'm not. I want more. I deserve more. And if Antonio's interested, and I think he is, I don't know if I'll be able to resist. It all started so innocently, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Antonio came into the store again a few days after we'd chatted about dinner. This time he was even more charming, asking about my day, making jokes that actually made me laugh out loud, the kind of laugh I hadn't had in so long. He lingered again, and before I knew it, we were flirting. It wasn't anything over the top, but it felt good. Too good. When he asked for my number, my stomach flipped. I panicked for a second and blurted out, "I'm married." It came out awkward and shaky, like I wasn't even sure myself. Antonio just glanced at my hand and chuckled. "Yeah, I kind of figured." He nodded toward my ring finger, then smiled. "It's okay. Friends can have phone numbers too, right?" I hesitated, but before I could stop myself, I nodded and gave it to him. "Yeah, friends," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. The guilt was there, bubbling under the surface, but it was drowned out by the excitement. He asked me when I got off work, and I told him. "Text me when you're free," he said, his tone light and casual, like this was no big deal. But it felt like a huge deal to me. That night, as soon as my shift ended, I texted him. My fingers trembled as I typed out a simple, "Hey, it's Allison." His reply came almost instantly. "Hey, glad you texted. How was the rest of your day?" And just like that, we started talking. And talking, and talking. It was easy with him. Effortless. He made me laugh with his quick wit and goofy humor, and we had so much in common. We liked the same movies, hated the same kind of music, and could vent about work in a way that felt therapeutic. Before I knew it, I was spilling my guts to him, telling him about how hard things were at home, how Peter didn't care about anything, how he let himself go and never tried anymore. I even called Peter names I wouldn't have dared say out loud, like lazy, broke, and ugly. Antonio just listened, occasionally chiming in with something supportive. One night, after a particularly long texting session, I said, "I'm just glad I met you. You make me feel, I don't know, like I matter." His reply made my heart skip. "I'm glad I met you too, Allison. I think we're good for each other." I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The guilt was still there, lingering in the back of my mind, but it was faint. I told myself that it didn't matter because Peter clearly didn't care about me anymore. If he couldn't even look up from his phone when I talked to him, why should I feel bad about finding someone who did? But Peter wasn't as oblivious as I thought. A few nights later, I was texting Antonio in bed, giggling quietly at something he'd said. It was the second time that week, and I could tell Peter noticed. He rolled over and glanced at me. "Who are you texting? You're gonna keep me up all night again." "Just my sister," I lied, my voice a little too high-pitched. "She's sending me memes and gossiping about some drama." I smiled like it was no big deal, and Peter nodded, rolling back over. Tell her to save it for a phone call on the weekend, he said, half joking. You're keeping me up with all that giggling. I forced a laugh, and he dropped it. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that Peter decided to text my sister the next day. They've always had a decent relationship. Nothing weird, just friendly enough to joke around. He sent her a playful message. Hey, save the memes and drama for a phone call next time. Allison's keeping me up all night laughing about it. Her reply came back quickly. Husha. What are you talking about? Peter explained, and her confusion grew. She had no idea what he was talking about, and when she texted me later to ask, my heart sank. By then, Peter had already put the pieces together. I could see it in the way he looked at me that evening, his eyes sharp and searching, like he was waiting for me to slip up. I tried to act normal, brushing it off when my sister told me to keep her out of whatever was going on. But deep down, I knew Peter suspected something. The next night, it all came crashing down. I was on the couch, texting Antonio and smiling at my phone, when Peter suddenly reached over and snatched it out of my hand. What the hell, Peter? I shouted, scrambling to grab it back, but he held it out of reach. What's so funny, huh? Let's see what's keeping you up all night. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach churn. Give it back! I tried to sound outraged, but the panic in my voice gave me away. He unlocked my phone and started scrolling, his face hardening with every message he read. So this is who you've been texting? He said, his voice rising. This Antonio guy? Talking about how I'm lazy and broke? Calling me ugly? You've been flirting with this guy, saying how glad you are you met him, while I'm sitting here thinking I'm in a marriage? Are you kidding me? Peter, just relax. It's not what it looks like. I stammered, but he wasn't buying it. Shut up. He snapped, his voice trembling with anger. Just shut the hell up. I don't want to hear your excuses. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they weren't from guilt, they were from being caught. You don't get it, Peter. I've been miserable for years. You don't care about me, you don't try, and you don't even notice me anymore. Oh, so that's why you're talking to some other guy? Because I don't notice you? He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Maybe if you spent half as much energy on this marriage as you do on texting him, we wouldn't be in this mess. I snapped. What marriage, Peter? There is no marriage. I'm tired of being with someone who doesn't have his life together, who doesn't care about his appearance, who doesn't even try to make me happy. Antonio made me realize I deserve better, and I do. His face twisted in disbelief. You're actually ridiculous. You think you deserve better? You're the one who put us in debt. You're the one who spends money like it grows on trees. And now you're blaming me for everything wrong in your life? Allison, are you crazy? I didn't have an answer for that, so I lashed out. At least Antonio sees my worth. At least he makes me feel special, which is more than you do. I'm started to hate the sight of you. You disgust me. You're broke, you're ugly, you don't even want to try to do better. You're okay with being a bottom, and it's pathetic. Peter's voice dropped, cold and steady. You're mad at me for catching you cheating? You're mad at me for reading the texts where you trash-talk me to some other guy? You know what, Allison? I don't even care anymore. I stopped loving you the second I read those messages. The words hit me like a slap, but instead of feeling hurt, I felt anger. Fine. Maybe we should get divorced. Maybe I should go be with Antonio, because he's everything you're not. Do it. Peter shot back, standing up. Get out of my life. I don't even care anymore. You're not worth it. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Where are you going? I demanded, my voice shaking. To the bar? To your butt buddies? I sneered, hoping to get a rise out of him, but he just looked at me, his expression a mix of disgust and disappointment. You're not even worth a response, he said flatly, slamming the door behind him so hard the whole house seemed to shake. For the first time in years, the silence felt deafening. 3 weeks after Peter stormed out, we finalized the decision to divorce. There wasn't a screaming match or dramatic confrontation. By then, we both knew there was no saving the marriage. The damage was done, and we had grown too far apart to even consider patching things up. Still, as we sat across from each other at the lawyer's office, signing the paperwork, I could feel his disappointment radiating. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. For the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of the love he used to have for me, but it was buried under layers of hurt and betrayal. "I did love you," he said quietly, almost to himself, as we gathered our papers. "I really did." I didn't know what to say. A part of me felt guilty, but I quickly pushed it aside. This was for the best, I told myself. We weren't happy. I deserved more. At least, that's what I believed at the time. 3 months later, I was happier than I'd been in years. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. I moved out of the apartment Peter and I had shared, and into Antonio's place. It was everything I thought I'd wanted. A fresh start with a man who seemed perfect. Antonio and I were great together, or so I thought. I worked less because he could provide for us, and I felt less stressed about money for the first time in years. I started gaining a little happy relationship weight, but Antonio didn't seem to mind. If anything, he said I looked even better with a little softness. We spent our weekends trying new restaurants, going to wine tastings, and planning vacations. It felt like a dream. He'd even drop little comments about how he could see us getting married someday. "We'd be good at it," he said once with a smirk, making my heart flutter. I thought I'd finally made the right choice. I felt like I was young again, like life was finally going the way it was supposed to. The stress, the resentment, the constant worrying, gone. I told myself this was my reward for walking away from a relationship that was suffocating me. I felt alive. And then one day, everything came crashing down. It started small, a few missed calls, a shift in Antonio's behavior. He'd suddenly seem distracted when we were together, his phone always face down on the table or tucked in his pocket. At first, I brushed it off. He was a busy man with a demanding job, I told myself. But the signs became harder to ignore. One night, he went out with friends and came home late, reeking of cologne that wasn't his. When I asked about it, he laughed it off, saying someone at the bar spilled their drink on him. Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist, but I didn't push. I didn't want to seem paranoid. A week later, I saw a text flash across his phone while he was in the shower. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and the message said, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My heart dropped. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew. When I finally confronted him, he didn't deny it. He admitted he'd been seeing someone else, a younger woman he met at the gym. "It's not serious," he said, as if that made it better. But it wasn't just her. As I dug deeper, I realized there were others. Antonio, the man I thought was perfect, had been juggling multiple women the entire time we were together. "You're an amazing woman," he said, as if that was supposed to soften the blow. "But you know I'm a catch. These things happen." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I had left my marriage for this man, convinced he was everything Peter wasn't, only to find out he was a liar and a cheater. I packed my things and left that same night. My heart shattered. The next few weeks were a blur of anger, regret, and self-loathing. I deleted my social media accounts, too embarrassed to face the world. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone seeing my perfect relationship crumble so quickly. The same friends who had cheered me on for leaving Peter were now silent. I felt like I had nothing and no one. I threw myself back into work, taking every shift I could to distract myself. But the nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. I kept thinking about Peter, how he used to look at me, how he'd tried in his own way, even if it wasn't enough for me back then. I started to see our marriage differently, realizing that while he wasn't perfect, he'd been honest. He never pretended to be more than he was. He loved me in his quiet, simple way, and I had thrown it all away for a fling that didn't even last a year. I wanted to try dating again, but the thought of it made me sick. I was in my late 30s now, and the idea of starting over felt exhausting. I kept thinking, what if nobody loves me again? What if Peter was the only one who ever truly cared about me? Those thoughts ate away at me, and no matter how much I tried to push them aside, they always came back. One night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, pictures of Peter and me from when we first got married. We looked so happy, so hopeful. I started crying, not just because of what I'd lost, but because I'd thrown it away without even trying to fix it. I have no idea how Peter is doing now. We haven't spoken since the divorce, and I don't have the courage to reach out. Part of me hopes he's doing better, that he's moved on and found someone who appreciates him in a way I couldn't. But another part of me hates the thought of him being happier than I am. As for me, I'm still working on paying off my personal debt. I've started to rebuild my life, piece by piece, but it feels like a hollow victory. I thought leaving Peter would be the start of something better, but now I can't help but wonder if I made the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe he's out there now, with someone who loves him for who he is, someone who doesn't need him to be perfect. Or maybe he's still at the bar with his friends, laughing and drinking, not giving me a second thought. Either way, he's probably better off than I am. And honestly, he deserves to be.